Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Today I actually went to the MK Party press conference. Jacob Zuma was there and several other people were there as well. And he didn't read out the statement. Other people read out the statement, but he did participate in the question and answer section. The long and short of it is that the MK Party will be going to Parliament. They will continue to participate in some litigation to try to resolve questions that they think still need to be resolved. Some around who can and cannot be members of Parliament. They're still going to take the issue of Jacob Zuma not being allowed to go to Parliament to the International Court, perhaps. But one of the things I wanted to do was to ask them two questions. And I'll explain why I wanted to ask those two questions before I show you the question and the answer to the question. The one question I wanted to ask was about the ENCA interview that was not aired, and just to get a feel for how they reflected on whether or not it had an impact. I was relatively uncomfortable when ENCA said that they were not going to show the Jacob Zuma interview because they recorded the interview, they advertised the interview, and I felt that it was something that could have a material impact on how certain demographics may feel about their voting options on the day. So I was very vocal when ENCA said they're not going to do it, because a few hours later, a different news publication actually showed an interview of Thabo Mbeki. And I thought, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. I think that they should have aired the interview. I think that they should have aired it live actually on the Sunday before, because the interview was supposed to be on the Sunday and then eventually got aired. It was supposed to then be aired the next day as a pre-record. Then it wasn't aired at all. So I asked him a question about that. I am concerned that sometimes within the South African media landscape, we have particular media houses that choose narratives, choose coalitions, choose enemies, choose the good guys, and it all seems very manipulative. And I think we need to support new media houses, new media projects, new media voices. I've seen also that sometimes if you're too honest as an analyst, you won't get invited to particular media houses, regardless of how much research you've done, how long you've been in the game. They just don't want to hear things that are critical of certain people. So if you speak about Phala or you ask questions about Raymond Zondo and maybe some of the decisions he made, then all of a sudden, or if you say the State Capture Commission ignored Glencore or ignored, what NASPAS did and did not do, or what other companies are doing in forms of capture, then all of a sudden, you're not worthy of being aired. So I have concerns in general about the media. The other question that I asked him was about constitutionalism, because there's been a discussion that people are trying to change the constitution. Some people are against the constitution. So I felt it's fair to ask them this, particularly because they're speaking about parliamentary sovereignty. So here are the questions that I asked. Here are the answers. Please, before we go to the questions, make sure you're subscribed. Double tap that subscribe. Is it double tap? Tap the subscribe. 89% of you are not subscribed, the viewers. Please subscribe. It helps YouTube know that you love this content. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to do another episode. But this one is just about the Zuma press conference, the question I asked, and the answers I received. Tell me, do you think that those questions were answered adequately? Let's have a conversation in the comment section. But here are the questions and the answers.
3 and 4, but do introduce yourself and the media house you represent. Yes, the mic. 4 at 5, 6. It's only 6 cents.
Sure. Hello, this is Jamie Mighty from the Africa Research Desk. I've got two questions. One is about the role of the media, and two is about the constitutionalism discussion. On the role of the media, I think that I would like to get some reflection from the MK Party about the non-airing of the interview by ENCA at the time close to the election. Do you believe that that had a material impact on election outcomes, considering that other interviews were aired? For example, the Thabo Mbeki interview on Power FM. when the reason for not airing the interview was that it was within 48 hours of the election. More broadly, do you think that the conduct of the media in this election has been preferential to certain political parties and personalities? And finally, if it has been, how does that get addressed? So that's the first question. The second question is from a legal perspective. The Harris cases are used to demonstrate why a parliamentary sovereignty is dangerous in a democracy. And the argument that has been made in the statement is that you want to have, as part of your reforms, parliamentary sovereignty over the constitution. Can you respond to how the abuse of a system like that could be curtailed? Because the reason why it was not chosen was to prevent a parliament from doing whatever it likes if it has the votes. And I think when the criticism is raised about anti-constitutionalism, it is based on the fact that you are pursuing this particular model, not particularly that you want to make amendments. Thank you.
Number two.
Good day, my name is Thando Maego. I'm from the Business Day.
A marathon interview that took 2 hours. We started from around midnight until 2 a.m. We never, in any way, held back on any questions. We never told him what questions to ask. He engaged President Zuma openly. And President Zuma responded to every single question. The problem, and what is interesting, is that, in actual fact, it was before 12 o'clock, President, if I recall. Because at 12, they were going to go off alive. So we're trying to get the interview done live. JJ Tabane contacted the team in the form of the senior leaders within ENCA for a live. They refused a live. Instead, they wanted it to be pre-recorded. We then agreed, it's fine, we'll go ahead with the pre-record. Take into consideration that it will be aired on JJ Tabane's show on the Monday. Did it happen on Monday morning, on the Monday evening show? No. So, we know that the MD, Norman, of ENCA, and maybe the ENCA team here can tell us when our interview is going to be aired. But Norman, we know, has got a very close relationship with the likes of Kumbuzo Chavin and Cyril Ramaphosa. We know that. So if you want your answer in terms of why there is censorship in this ENCA, that is the reason why. ENCA took me live, but you'll never see that interview that I did live in the media or in social media. Why? Because I'm speaking about the IEC. So the issue of censorship, and we know that at times in most cases it's not the reporter's problems or issue to cover certain things. You are censored yourself, we know, by your bosses, what you must ask, what you can't ask. And that must come to an end. So, do we believe that it had a material impact? Absolutely. It did have an impact on the elections. There's no doubt. What were they hiding? And by the way, in that interview, President Zuma says things he has never said in public. So we need to demand that that interview is played in its totality. And one thing we have learned is to bring our own camera.
Thank you, Comrade Musi. I'll be brief. The first question from Mighty Jamie had to do with parliamentary sovereignty versus constitutional supremacy. Correct?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, look, again, I'm answering obviously on behalf of the client here. But my understanding, personally, I'm a constitutionalist. But what the MK party and former President Zuma has been saying all along, I think, are two simple things. If you see the narrative from Steenhuisen and now even recently yesterday, unfortunately also from Mr. Malula, they posed this so-called GNU thing as a battle between those who believe in the Constitution and those who are against the Constitution. Now that's a false narrative which is just being created to confuse the people. None of the organizations that are not in that GNU have ever called for anti-constitutionalism. So how I understand the argument is twofold. That you cannot say that to amend the Constitution is unconstitutional, because the Constitution itself has provisions for its amendment, right? So, firstly, the amendments that are suggested in the political terrain are twofold. The first one has to do with the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, which would remove the compensation requirement for land repossession, right? So let's call that the smaller amendment of a part of the Bill of Rights, which is also provided for in the Constitution. The second category is the one that former President Zuma is talking about, which is to say that is a system at this juncture of our democracy, is a system that is totally dependent on judges, in the sense that the judges have the final say, which is what you call, lawyers call constitutional supremacy, as opposed to parliamentary sovereignty, where the elected representatives of the people have the ultimate say. And that's a debate which I think is legitimate. If the MK party is wrong on that, well, people can be wrong. That's why it's called a debate. But to stifle the debate by labeling people as anti-constitutionalists because they are raising that debate is completely wrong. Actually, that is unconstitutional, because that's a violation of their right to hold their views in terms of Section 16 of the Constitution. So I think that's where the debate is. There's no right or wrong. Britain, which is regarded as one of the leading, if not the first democracy, has a system of parliamentary sovereignty. Nobody ever said that is a dictatorship or draconian. So there are systems, and I think that that's what is being raised. So the debate should be had, I think, by scholars, by academics, by politicians, by all of us, by the population. It must not be stifled with labels. So that's the first issue. The second issue that was asked was about the international, what are the international legal steps that the MK party is talking about? Well, on this one I'll be very brief, because I obviously can't give the legal advice to the media before I give it to the clients. But I can give you a hint. You would have heard that the reaction from Kobet after the Constitutional Court outcome was that one of the things that they were considering was approaching the United Nations Human Rights Committee. Now that committee, the reason why he referred to it is because that committee has actually, just by coincidence, dealt with a similar case, which those who were in the Constitutional Court will remember, we cited in court. It's a case of a gentleman called Disanayake, who, just by coincidence, was denied in Sri Lanka the opportunity to stand as a member of parliament on the basis of, guess what? Contempt of court. So it's a case that's actually on all fours. And that court, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, found that the government of the state of Sri Lanka was wrong to deny Mr. Disanayake his right to be a member of parliament on the basis of having been convicted for contempt of court. And it found that that is a violation of Articles 9, 14, and 25 of the Charter, or what is known as the ICCPR. Now, so that's that avenue that is being explored. But secondly, I might just tell you, there's a gentleman called Reynold de Beer who filed papers in the Constitutional Court, which demonstrated that he has taken a case, a separate case on behalf of former President Zuma, against his incarceration in the first place in the African Court for Human Rights. And I'm not his spokesperson, he'll speak for himself, but I can tell you this, which is the most interesting that nobody seems to know, that in that case, the state of South Africa made submissions which said that, no, this is, this is water under the bridge and so on and so on, and the case should be kicked out. And that court found in favor of former President Zuma. So that case is still alive. I think there are protocols where you cannot get into public details about what happens in that court. But I can tell you that much, that that case is still alive. So when we talk about international fora, we're talking about the African Court for Human Rights, that other court that I mentioned before, or rather the Human Rights Committee, and any other such forum. The bottom line is that the former president does not accept that interpretation that was given by the Constitutional Court. And when we say local and international remedies, there are other remedies, there's rescission, there's all sorts of things. So all that will be considered and then presented to the clients, and then they will choose which route they want to follow, if any. We might come back saying there's no route, but if we give the routes, it will be those that I've just mentioned. Thank you.